Hi everyone, it's Shar and welcome back to another save file video. If you can't tell, I've been feeling super inspired for my save file, and yes, I've had to start all over. The most recent save file videos you would have seen are the current ones, and some older ones. Some of those families still do exist in my save file, but ultimately I moved it over to its own brand new save file because I've mentioned this in previous videos. Building it in with Not So Berry was a fun idea, but Not So Berry has to have aging on, which meant that the families there would eventually die and their storylines wouldn't matter to you at all. So I thought I'll just add the Not So Berry family and some of my other like legacy generation families into that save file, but with their last gen. So I really like this video format of doing the create a sim and the family introduction in the video, and then doing the speed build for this family. Now, we're not actually building this family's house. We will build their house because they are an Oasis Springs family. I'm almost done with one neighborhood in Oasis Springs, which I'm super happy about, and it's given me a lot of motivation to continue with my save file. I found that building one neighborhood at a time and chunking it that way in my mind has been really helpful, as opposed to trying to build everything at once and get overwhelmed with how many worlds there are and how many neighborhoods there are. Just one neighborhood at a time. So you're going to see, in fact, the restaurant that this sim right here owns. Her name is Nyla. You'll hear more about her story in a minute. But Nyla lives in Oasis Springs with her husband Arjun and her teenage daughter Jewell. Now, Nyla is a young adult and her husband Arjun is an adult. So there is a little bit of an age gap there, but not anything too significant. Honestly, Nyla is like a very driven, ambitious sim. She's a foodie and she's always dreamed of owning her restaurant. And then her husband Arjun, this dude here, who will get a little bit of a makeover to match my own aesthetic style in The Sims. He is a gardener. He really loves flowers, herbalism, fishing, just anything to live off the land, which obviously works super well with Nyla's aspiration to own her own restaurant because her husband is a gardener. He loves planting his own crops. I was gonna say produce, his own crops. So their restaurant really does have incredibly fresh ingredients, and there is a restaurant across the road that is very historic in Oasis Springs. It has a bit of a reputation for like where famous writer sims go. It's a bit outdated. It wasn't necessarily well managed before, and Nyla has finally been able to purchase it. Now, in the description, you'll learn a little bit about this family, but one thing I want to elaborate on, which just didn't fit into the description, is that Arjun and Nyla are not married yet. They actually are freshly engaged. When I was setting them up, the story is that they have been focused on their businesses and their family for a really long time. Arjun owns a flower shop in Newcrest, and a lot of the funds from that flower shop has actually been saved and put aside because both Arjun and Nyla had jobs. Nyla was in the chef's career, but now she's not. She is running her restaurant, but they had been saving quite a bit, and actually a huge chunk of the profit from Arjun's plant shop was going into the saving fund for the restaurant. And that's obviously been to Nyla's benefit, and Arjun has been really supportive in that. He views it as a family restaurant, but I wonder if perhaps there's a little bit of resentment there in that Arjun wasn't able to expand his plant shops in the way that he's wanted to throughout his life because he's been helping his wife fund her dream of having a restaurant, even though he's fully supportive. So that's just a potential storyline that you can explore. But what's interesting about the Larimore family, one, I was not using CC for their like create a sim at all. This is all things that are in game except for their eyes, which is just a natural override that I have, and I gave them eyelashes. So if you don't have eyelashes, that's the only thing you're going to lose. Why is Miss Jewell just standing here and staring at us? I don't know. I must have spaced off while I was doing this. So across the road, a new family has moved in, and that is the Cortez family. Now, Nyla is not happy about this because she knows the Cortez family. In fact, the father, Hernando, is Nyla's ex. They were together all throughout high school, and even while Nyla was away at culinary school, she thought they were so in love and would eventually get married and have a family, as they always discussed. But one day he confessed to her that he had been cheating, and now they have that history and relationship, and Nyla thinks it's very suspicious that Mr. Hernando has moved in across the road. But you can read the family bio. I won't spoil anything, but there's a little bit something going on with Hernando's son and Nyla's daughter. So this is the restaurant we end up building in, and y'all tell me why. It took me like 4 hours to build this. I will admit that I changed lots. This is the lot we ultimately stay on, but before this I cut out a part of the video where I was on a different lot that was just way too big for what it was that I wanted to do. Now, for much of this build, I was pretty lost about what it is that I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to have an outdoor staircase to kind of access this patio lounge area, but I didn't know what the aesthetic was. I figured it has to fit into Oasis Springs. I want this kind of old school, almost Spanish style architecture. Most of the architecture around them in this neighborhood is somewhat similar, but this is by far the oldest lot in the Sims world, or in this section of Oasis Springs. In their neighborhood, it is the oldest lot. As I mentioned, it is a historic restaurant, very well known for its prior famous guests. It's been around since, I don't know, like the 1800s or something. The most famous Sims writers have eaten here before. It's the kind of restaurant that would have shown up on a Yelp list as a must-do while you are here, and it is heavily inspired by a trip I took last year to Madrid, which, by the way, was such a freaking fun time. Madrid was gorgeous, and yes, that was a solo trip. I do tend to travel alone, and it was just such a good time. So it was inspired kind of by that. So the tiling inside is older. I try to make it look like Nyla had just purchased this restaurant. So the interior is a little bit more old school, but there are some bits that she's modernized, but she didn't want to change it too much because part of the appeal of this restaurant is history. And part of that is, of course, like the old architecture, the stone floors, some of the railings, the details, like the stairs would have been, the exterior stairs would have been the original ones in the build, but mostly I focus on the outside because where this is going to shine is it's an outdoor area, and that's because they're in Oasis Springs. They have the beauty of very warm, very like gorgeous sunny weather, and it is slowly transitioning into spring. As I am recording this, it's very much still winter because it's February, but you know, I'm convincing myself that it's slowly transitioning into spring. And I don't know about you, but I know that when the weather is really warm, it tends to be when restaurants are most popular here in New York City. You can see that like the streets are completely, like if the restaurants have outdoor seating, all those seats are filled, the rooftops are super popular. So that was the inspiration behind this build. Yes, you could come inside and like enjoy the history, but really what Nyla has converted is the exterior, where you come outside. It's a place where you hang out with your friends in this little decking area. There's a bar, there's going to be a dance floor you'll speak without in a moment. There's some like bar height tables in the corners that I'll pop in, some music. So just really a fun spot to chill with your friends, come have a drink, have a really casual date, just like a good time to hang out, because I didn't want it to only be a restaurant where you would like come down and eat. I wanted it a place to be that you could go to get something to eat, but also linger, hang out a little bit, and just have a fun time with your pals. Like there is this dance floor and this bar area upstairs if you wanted to go and hang out there. When we get downstairs to the exterior, you'll see more about that, but I won't spoil it. And I'm trying to get better at building community lots, and I'll say that I think that I have done that. I fixed that tiling, by the way. I think I've done that to an extent. I very much still have a style that I stick to when it comes to community lots, but there's more that we're going to expand into. I also changed those chairs out because I hate how they look together. I think I swapped them for something else, or if I don't, I leave them, and that's awkward. But The interior was really hard to play with the layout as well, because I knew that I wanted to have like a hallway with these stall bathrooms in them as well. So one side would be the stairs and the other side would be the hallway that leads up to the stairs and the bathroom. That was very awkward. I don't know why I said it like that, but I hope you get the point. You'll see it in the design anyway. So I wanted it to be like that, but you can see that it eats into a huge chunk of the building when we lay it out that way. So downstairs actually can't have any indoor dining. So I thought, okay, well, what space is this going to be? Because that entire square can't be the kitchen, meaning that back square can't be the kitchen. It's way too large. That's way too much space for us to take up. And I thought, okay, wait a minute. If this is a restaurant that's very well known, a super popular tourist destination, maybe it wasn't popular with the locals before it was renovated and turned into like this really cool hangout area by Nyla. So I thought, what could we do? I thought, oh, let's do a waiting room, like a little waiting area or a little lounge area. So yet another place where your Sims could hang out. So what I ended up doing is moving the kitchen to the very, very back wall, kind of like a galley style kitchen. And then I pop in this little room that's actually just going to have like a TV, a couch, and a little glow bar, because I didn't want to have multiple bars on the lot, because I know from playing the game that there's only going to be one bartender at the bar, and I didn't want you to have one bar that was staffed and one bar that wasn't when you played. There's just one central bar area, and then I wanted to really utilize hallways for this, because it's supposed to be an older build, right? It's not as open plan. Maybe Nyla has knocked down some of the walls upstairs, but the architecture mostly remains. And then I put this piano in the corner, because again, I'm just trying to eat up space. This is the more historic part of the build. It's where you may come to have a celebration, but like I mentioned, for everyday use, the intention is that you would be taking advantage of the beautiful weather and you would be hanging out outside in the area that we've created. And I also played with a little bit of terrain paint in this build, which was really fun for me, or terrain paints, the terrain tools. I didn't branch out too much in that I didn't use any like hills or dips, just because the world is flat and it looks very odd if I suddenly had hills. And look at me actually using the Sims 3 camera and tilting down to see, does it look good from the exterior? Does it make sense? I do change the railings for the upstairs patio area to something darker, just because it doesn't match the windows and the wood of the rest of the build. Like I mentioned, compared to the rest of like the builds around them, this house is definitely more Spanish style, but still has some things in common with the houses around it, so that it doesn't stick out too much from its Oasis Springs atmosphere. I come back to this fencing eventually. Like, it was driving me nuts because none of the woods actually matched, and I didn't like the simpler aesthetic. And then I think, oh, I'll just change the wood of the pergola area. No, I'm not. If you can see all those gray lines, it's impossible to change all of them. So I just leave that as a task to come back to later. And I do eventually come back to the build later. And as I was doing this, I just wanted to give myself some creative room. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Nyla's husband, Arjun, is actually we leave that fireplace out. I was like, oh, I could take off from the roof. No, it doesn't work. Don't worry. We leave it out. We just have table spaces upstairs. And of course we use this old school lighting just to fit with like the idea that it's part of the original features of the building. The building pretty much is the same as when Nyla got it. She just updated some bits and pieces of it to bring it more into the future, but Nyla's idea was definitely more in the exterior. The kitchen is super simple as well. We just make sure that they have a fridge. Not that they actually need one at a restaurant, but for realism, I wanted them to have a fridge and an industrial dishwasher. And I put in this door into the kitchen because I thought, wait a minute, if the the building is not connected to the outdoor in any way, since that the upstairs doesn't have a way to get out onto that decking area, you really do have to go outside to the exterior to do that, because that was my intention. I wanted it to be kind of like something that they built onto. They removed the roofs and they created that decking with the pergola, etc. So that was my idea. So that's the focus of that. But I needed a door so the waiters could actually get out of the building through a way that isn't the front door, so they could go and serve up the customers who are eating outside. So Anyway, I put down some of the restaurant stuff. I really focus on like the furniture before I do things like the paint, the walls, the flooring, etc., etc., etc. I just wanted to make sure that we had met all of the requirements for a restaurant, and I wanted there to be some kind of backing, since this is essentially like the waiting area that you would walk into. And I like this wood planking thingy that we chose because it feels kind of like a real restaurant. I'm sure that I have walked into restaurants where that's the aesthetic and that's the vibe, and this is the seating area that I mentioned earlier. I didn't even realize this menu thing was an option, but I freaking love it. We filled up as many spaces as we could in this restaurant just because I wanted it to feel like a family-owned place. So that's what we ended up doing. I eventually do switch my focus to the exterior, and I would say of this entire build, I was most excited to build the exterior, but I wanted to make sure that we had the interior down packed. Now, this is a restaurant, as I was mentioning earlier on, that does have some touches of Arjun as well. So you're going to notice there's lots of plans, especially on the exterior, lots of plans and florals for the restaurant. And it's actually a vegetarian place. The food that they serve is very much like Central, South American style food, because Nyla actually completed her culinary degree in, that was her specialty. That's what she specializes in, is that kind of food. So that's what we ended up going for. And it's all vegetarian because her husband Arjun is vegetarian, and that's what we wanted to specialize in. So I absolutely love that for the restaurant. I don't limit myself to any packs here. I was just trying to go with what I thought made sense for what I was looking for. I do change out the yellow tables. I just changed the swatch because I knew as I was doing it, I didn't want it to be yellow. That was a little bit too close to so many of the darker like wooden tones that we had, that it was just creating an ick kind of feeling in me. So I do switch it out. I don't put any decorations on the tables. Like I mentioned, I wanted the interior to feel like older, historic. So that's what I go with, something very simple, something where the food kind of speaks for itself. And I swap it out for these blue tables to match kind of like the old wood paneling and the wallpaper. So you can see, I hope you can see that we've really captured the vibe. Again, I was being inspired by a restaurant I went to in Madrid, and I wanted the flooring to kind of be tile or stone, but it just didn't look good. It didn't translate well in The Sims. So ultimately I just went with wood flooring that I thought was the closest to the wallpaper that we have upstairs. The downstairs wallpaper does change, and that stairway I put in as like a little bit of a nod to we're pretending here like it's historic nature. It's something that was the original. And I really like the bright orange here, but I was like, ooh, that's too much. So we go with some simple kind of yellowy stone, very, very simple interior. And that's pretty much it, honestly. I usually come into these speed builds with so much to talk to you about, but I don't have a lot to talk to you about in this moment. I also realize I'm talking to my computer screen as if my microphone is in my computer screen. It's not. My microphone is right next to me. So apologies if I sound a little bit distant in this. Okay, so we're finally moving on to the exterior of the build, because obviously this huge patio area is going to have somewhere to hang out. And as I mentioned earlier, Arjun is a gardener. He is specifically a florist. He owns a plant and flower shop. So this restaurant is actually covered in plants, starting with this wall here. Some of it is native, some of it is things that Arjun has put in. And oh my gosh, we come to the terrain stuff, which I'm leaving into the video just so you can see if you're building and you're wondering like, oh, what does it actually take to do this? I just wanted to be like very transparent about it. Really is a matter of placing down objects one by one by one by one by one. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on this pond because obviously Oasis Springs is a desert. This pond is not natural. It is something that Nyla had built in to the lot, so it just adds a little bit of a touch, creating that I'm on vacation kind of feel. And yes, I do rocks to layer it, and then I also layer it with a bunch of flowers and bushes. And I am not going to narrate me doing that, but I'm also not going to cut it, so enjoy me placing plants down one by one by one by one, thankfully it sped up. So however long it took in this video, it is sped up by 5.5. So it took 5.5 times as long to do it IRL. So, like I mentioned, there's only so much I can talk to you about this lot. So let me talk to you about something that I did recently. So I've been really focusing on enriching my life through hobbies. Does that not sound so ridiculously cheesy? But truthfully, it has been what I've been doing. I've been wanting to add more hobbies into my life and create more ways for me to be fully present. One way that I do that is through this channel. Thank you all so much for being here and watching my videos, because truly a huge part of the reason why I have so much fun playing The Sims is because I make these videos and I love having like the stories documented on my channel. So if, say, you're watching Not So Berry and it's 6 years in the future, that series would have been long over, but you can still come back, and Clover and Micah James and Nova, they would still be there on the video, kind of immortalized, and I would always remember them and their story. So that's one aspect of it. But another aspect of it is I genuinely just love playing with you all. I have so much fun creating that and knowing that you all are enjoying the videos. I know I'm pretty bad at responding to comments, and I sincerely apologize for that. That's just because for almost the entire time I've had a channel, I rarely ever get comments, and the comments that I did get was spam. So I kind of just trained myself to not even I don't receive notifications for the comments. I don't see the comments, but then some of the comments that you all leave are so sweet. So I definitely appreciate y'all taking the time to do that. And I want to get better at responding to y'all, since it really is real people leaving comments on my videos. Now there's way too many tables on this patio area, and please don't worry, I go back and I scale that back because I realize it looks very cluttered, especially when we add in all of the chairs. So we do scale that back, and we put in a ton of warmers, because yes, it is Oasis Springs, but trust me, it do be getting cold in the desert, okay? So we put down some warmers in case that is a cooler night when your sim is out here on the patio doing whatever it is that they are doing. Anyway, I just went on a whole tangent. So something I did recently as part of building those hobbies for myself, of course, I also have a really strong love of reading. As you all know, if you watch my other speed builds, I talk about my books and give y'all wrap-ups all the time. I've been talking for 30 minutes, so that's why I'm starting to stumble over my words. So I love reading, but I recently got a Nintendo Switch, and that was largely inspired by my nephew, who is 7 years old. He has his own Nintendo Switch, and he wanted me to get my own simply because he wants us to play games together, which is so cute. Because are you gonna get a 7-year-old to jump on FaceTime with you and talk to you about nothing? Maybe, but not that often. But what you will get a 7-year-old to do is play video games with you. So I got that, and we spent all of yesterday just playing Mario. So we played like Mario Party, and then we played the Mario bundle, which is like Bowser's Fury. We had so much fun playing that together, and it was really sweet. And I had a lot of fun playing with my Switch. What I will tell you is that those super popular games on the Switch are freaking expensive. $60 plus $5 tax. Y'all, I spent $120 something on video games alone, and I only got 2. Also, I realized at some point in this video, I turn off my reshade mod. So if it gets suddenly darker, that is why it gets suddenly darker. I accidentally clicked the button to switch off my reshade and didn't notice, but that's fine. That's more authentic to what it would look like in your game if you don't have reshade or you don't use the same reshade as me. But the Sims world is honestly pretty freaking dark, so I'm glad that I have my reshade. That's the main reason why I bought a computer. So anyway, I am really enjoying my Switch, even though I've only had it for the day. I also want to download Animal Crossing because I've never played, and I want to see what all the hype is about, because truly the mobile version of Animal Crossing is not fun. I put in these fountains, by the way, because I thought they were super cute, and I like the idea of the fountains kind of shooting up as you walk past it in the walkway, and I try to cover some of the edges with some plants. Again, Arjun is a gardener, so all of these flowers that you see around the lot, they're not just placed there. These are plants that Arjun would have specifically placed on the lot, and he's the one that cares cares for him, cares for the plants on the lot. Even though it's The Sims, you don't actually have to care for these plants. They're landscaping. They get affected by the weather, but they're not actually things you have to like take care of at all. But they're things that Arjun keeps an eye on in the canonical version of this story. I do some ivy and then I scale it back. So I'm like, oh, we don't need to cover the whole building in ivy. I want some, but I don't want too many. And then we have this whole blank wall, and I have this idea that, oh my gosh, it would be so fun to have a waterfall here. And I put a bunch of like these leaf curtains from the plant kit, just because I think it looks cute and it's going with the vibe. And I put some of the food crates in the corner. I swapped those crates out, but I just replaced them with the ones that have like potato sacks and flour in the corner, just like a matter of like, oh, it's the bringing in of the shipment or some of the things that we collected. And this little area in the back, I don't think I ever said, because I was talking about my nephew and us playing the Switch, is going to be a garden area where Arjun keeps the produce for the restaurant. So you can really see that it's almost farm to table, except that the farm is on the lot. And of course it's vegetarian, so there are no animals that get slaughtered here. There's no animals at all. The water kind of annoyed me because I was trying to figure out how to get rid of that dip of the brown against the edge of the lot. Then I realized I'm gonna have to go through and place these plants one by one by one by one again, just to hide the dip in the lot. Now, as I mentioned in my most recent video, actually, I don't know where I'm posting this because I don't like to have too many speed builds one after the other. I like to have time for my Let's Plays to also go into my channel and get their fair share of time. But one of the videos I did was the bridal shop build, Plum Fields, which I absolutely love that bridal shop. I think it's so cute. I can't wait to have my own say yes to the dress moment in The Sims with my Sims. What was I even saying here? I don't know. Oh, yeah. I was saying in that video that I want my world and my save file to be semi-open, which I'm not sure what that means. But in my version of my save file, what that means is that there are actual things, objects, activities, hobbies, just things you can interact with around the world that are not tied to a lot. So if you were just walking around Oasis Springs, how many things could you find to do? Now, what was hard with this neighborhood in Oasis Springs is that so many of the lots actually are back to back, and the world is fully, I don't want to say furnished, but it's fully landscaped with all these rocks and then like the little mini fences that surround the rock. It's a heavily landscaped world, which makes it pretty hard to place down objects. But because it's base game, there's also plenty of collectible areas. So this is honestly one of the worlds, yeah, that has its own thing that you can do. Like, you can walk around this naturally base game and find plenty of things to like dig and interact with, but I do modify some things, just not on this lot specifically. Then I realized we probably need a trash can because things to throw out. I place one in the kitchen, I place one around the back, and then I place one on this tree. No, I remove it because I was like, wait a minute, the waiters would be collecting it. There's something that you're going to throw out. And I call this restaurant Como La Flor, which I'm super happy with. It's a nod to, yes, Selena, because it's this type of food that they serve, and also their love of Selena, but also Arjun. So that's the end of this video. As always, I've talked for a little bit too long, so I'm going to see you all in my next video. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, I appreciate y'all having here, and yeah, see you next time. Bye, everyone.